And welcome to Broadcast Team Alpha. We are live.
Hi, everybody. It's Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversations while exploring the quantum possibilities. We are Broadcast Team Alpha. I'm your co host, Nori Love, and I am graced once again with my co hosts, Aage Nost and Tom Schaefer. And we have an exceptional and remarkable guest today. I'm so excited, and Augie's going to tell you about Dr. Rita Louise in a minute. But first, I'd like to invite you to connect with us. Connect with us at broadcastteamalpha.com. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. This way, you will not miss any of the times that we go live, and you'll be notified and you'll be supporting us as well. So without any further ado, I would like to turn it over to Aage. Hi, Aage. Hi, Tom.
Howdy, howdy.
Hi.
Hello,
I,
hello.
I cannot wait for this interview with Dr. Rita.
Oh, no, then I'll hurry.
Yeah. You don't have to hurry.
Dr. Rita Louise PhD with us. And I don't like long introductions because if we're going to cover everything, I will have to sit here and talk to you for 5 minutes. So we're going to shorten it down a little bit. She is a best-selling author. She is also a radio host, and she's a former, actually, she is the founder of the Institute of Applied Energetics. And I want to talk about that because that sounds interesting. She's also the author of many books, E.T. Chronicles, What Myth and Legend Has to Say About Human Origin. Boy, that could get interesting. And also Avoiding the Cosmic 2x4. I think I had one of those. Feels like it. And then also she has another book out that's Dark Angels and The Insider's Guide to Ghosts, Spirits, and Attached Entities. Oh, and also within what was the title of the within the last one I think is the Stepping Out of Eden. Yeah, that's it. And she also writes articles globally that is published, and she's a video producer, and she is a medical intuitive. And I know I forgot a bunch of this, so if there's anything you want to add to it, that's wonderful. Otherwise, I like to jump in the water.
Well, hi guys, nice for having me on the show.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you for being here. It's so exciting.
All right, where
Dr.
in the world do we want to start? There's so much to talk about, Rita. And do you want to jump in the water first, or should we help you?
No, I definitely could use some help. You know, I've had shows have me come back on 3 or 4 times because I covered really a large variety of topics from, you know, ancient mystery, ancient alien type topics to ghosts and alternative healing, medical intuition, you know, so it's a pretty broad range of different topics that you could easily spend an hour on any of them.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in the origin of mankind, and right before the show, you showed us a footprint. It's in front of one of your books, and that is a very interesting footprint because it's one of a human, but it dates back probably some millions of years.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's called, so the cover of my book, and I think it's in the background, but I'll hold it up,
Oh, yeah.
has this footprint on it, and it is called the Stewpot footprint, and I'm really not really at liberty to give a whole lot of specific information about where it is, but it has been dated to being 290 Paleolithic, so 290,000 million years ago.
Yeah.
You know, but the whole location is very contentious because it is not accessible to people. It has not been cut out of the ground. And the only people that have gone there and done any kind of research were Don Patterson and Carl Bach, who were both creationists. You know, and so they have a part that it talks about where man and dinosaur walked the earth together. And so a lot of their material has been discredited, even though I've been to this location. The footprint does look like that. There is no way that it was carved into the rock. It is in such a remote place that there's nothing, nothing
Well, can you
around it. And unless someone like points down and says, "Here, look at this," you'd never see it. You know,
Well-
so it's not like on a wall somewhere. There's not any other carvings around it. It's just
well, can you give us an
in
idea
kind
of
of
the
wilderness area.
And
I
that's
wonder,
in New
geez.
Mexico? Can we
Yes.
talk about that? Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know about this one, but it dates back millions of years, and that kind of tells us that, yeah, maybe we've been around a while here.
Well, but was it us, or was it some other creature that just happened to have a bipedal, or a not bipedal, but has a non-divergent toe? You know, and it's interesting, and I'm just going to go off on a tangent.
That's
here for a
good.
second.
Yeah.
But in my book, Stepping Out of Eden, I look at quote unquote the theory of evolution because it really needs to be put on the table in general to talk about the development of humanity. And so to me, one of the first steps and what they count as humans being human or Homo sapien like is our ability to walk upright. And so they identified that Australopithecus has a non-divergent toe. So monkeys have a toe that sticks out to the side. When we look at our big toe, it goes forward. And so somewhere in our evolution, we went from having a toe like this to having a toe like this. But it's a mystery because we don't have feet or feet bones to see when that change happened. And why would it happen? Why would it happen?
Right.
And so,
Well, you make that link. You're the one that's making this link, much in the same way we talked a little bit earlier about how other ancient astronaut theorists, as we always hear on TV, you folks are all doing the kind of hard work and research. How many different places or countries have you been to kind of, or locations have you been to do a lot of this research?
I'm a student of myth,
Oh,
so I'm not, when these people go to locations, really what they're looking at is architecture,
All right.
and to me, architecture is way late in the game. So by the time we started writing, by the time we started building monumental sculptures or monumental buildings, it's way late in the game, and where my interest really lies is prior to that, and so Stepping Out of Eden really asked the essential question. I was doing an interview and he kept going, but culture 5,000 years ago. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We need to back that up. Why did we start to talk? Why did we start to create art? How did we start to develop social skills in order to be able to interact with each other? Like language, for example,
right.
There has to be a group consent as to, if you want to talk about a lion, everybody has to agree that the word lion means lion.
Right.
And so where did that come from? And how did we develop vocabulary? And how did we transmit that information? And why? All the other animals, they are fine doing whatever they do. So what was the benefit from doing that?
Many of the other animals actually have a form of communication, which I guess could be construed as somewhat of a language. I guess it probably those two started with grunts like, huh? That means that I didn't hear you, or things like that. And developed from there, maybe a little over time, to the point where there was one language, at least in one area, and another language in another area. And
well, what they're finding is that, there are many of the languages are actually, they can identify back to root languages. And so we think there are all these languages, but what they're finding is maybe not so much.
Really?
So that again pushes it further back in time. You start looking at this stuff and it keeps going further back in time, further back in time. But even in the Bible, it says that Adam named all the things that he came into contact with.
Right.
Where in the Quran, you look at these stories and you get different perspectives. In the Quran, it tells us that God told man the names of all the things in existence, which is actually more consistent with what we find in the mythic record where they taught us everything. And so it just makes me kind of go, with my little ancient alien theory, did they teach us how to speak? Was there a need for them to be able to communicate with us? And they gave us language. They taught us language so that we were able to interact with them on a better level.
Yeah.
So that is your ancient alien theory.
It's just one of them.
I love it. Can you tell us more about that? That's really intriguing to me. So,
well, one of the other things. Okay, so there's our ability to walk upright. There's and I'll just talk physiologically, some of the other major changes that occurred to us on a very functional level was increased brain size. So now we're able to rationalize and be able to do more mental constructs, which you can't have language unless you can envision the things in your mind.
Right.
Question for you.
Wait.
Along that line, this is important. Along that same line, there are those who have said that really ancient man actually was more spiritually attuned or electronically attuned, or sensitivity was greater towards the natural elements, like the same phenomenon that dogs can sense an earthquake coming, that we had some of that, and that a lot of these intuitive capabilities or telepathic capabilities, a lot of this was bred out of us to kind of like dumb us down. Is that jive with anything that any of your research?
I don't think it was bred out of us. I think it was drummed out of us by society, and social changes. I mean, one of the things that we find.
Sorry, it was the bird buffet. Somebody just knocked over the bird feeder. I'm so sorry.
So I totally lost my train of thought.
One
of the things that we find in indigenous cultures is the requirement of ritual, and the requirement of having the ritual experience, because when they practice ritual, and I'm talking about, so let's kind of imagine, F-Troop, and the Indians are dancing around the fire, and, singing war chants. They're not doing it just for entertainment. I mean, I guess it could be for entertainment, but there was really a deeper purpose. The purpose was for the group to entrain, so there actually is science that's tied to this, for the group to entrain in a specific frequency, and then for individuals within that group to reach a state where they could go into an ecstatic experience and commune with the gods. And so, but I think that we were able to do that by ourselves earlier, but because society has kind of made us be more mental, versus feeling oriented.
Well, you used a word entrain, and I heard you in this interview you just had with Kate, you said the same thing, and I really wanted you to go a little further with that. And we've talked about it here on our show in a different way. I think it's the same thing. Maybe explain to people that might not understand what you just said about entrainment.
So when a group, so it has to do with resonance, so if you have a tuning fork and you hit the tuning fork and you have a second tuning fork of the same key, it will make the other one vibrate. And so, and I'll kind of throw a little, people get Christian things, so I throw them in there. It's kind of like, when two or more gather together, and so when you have a group going together, working together, and they're all meditating, then the entire group will start vibrating at the same frequency, both physically, but also psychically, mentally. And so when that happens, that's when entrainment occurs, and so it can be done, like people can be entrained in a group, like group hypnosis, or you can listen to music, you go to a concert and everybody's jiving and grooving to the music that's being played.
There is a vibe. You know,
Right. But
yeah.
they're tapping into the vibe. And you can go to a concert. I used to do security work at a concert hall, this outdoor concert place where they paid me money to go see groups like the Eagles and stand and watch the soundboard.
That's awesome.
But then there were some not so great, or in my opinion, not so great groups that the vibe of the crowd was destructive. So I'll name call here a second. But I was at a Korn concert, and they kind of went a little crazy. And it was because of the music. It was also because of the mentality of the crowd. They were like turning over garbage cans, rushed the stage, fights were breaking out. I mean, it was just kind of like crazy. It was
That
crazy.
music has a tendency to trigger people. It feeds into anger and rage, a lot of it.
But it's also part of that entrainment, because now you have this group vibe, or when they sit there and they talk about, well, the people were okay and then something happened and now, there's a riot going on. It's because they're all at some frequency that's causing them to all act as a group mind.
So music is tied into this. The drum beat,
Well,
the music
yeah.
so you're
singing,
running around
the
a fire,
dancing.
and maybe they're on peyote or ayahuasca or something of that nature, and people are starting to get into spirit journeys, and things are getting pretty crazy. I can imagine.
And it's interesting because not all cultures utilized psychedelic materials to achieve the ecstatic state. And to be honest, I kind of feel like, all right, well, there's kind of two parts, that it's a little bit lazy. Like they were starting to lose their ability, their natural ability to achieve that state. So they had to find something to help them. But there has been some research that has been stopped on DMT, like real research with colleges, which might be kind of fun. But anyway, um, and they found that people that were using hallucinogens were able to be in and maintain the ecstatic state a little bit longer than if you were doing it naturally.
So you're obviously familiar with Terence McKenna.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So,
he was big on the mushrooms, and he was big on DMT, and his recitals about DMT were legendary. It was epic.
oh, really?
Yeah.
So, Dr. Rita, do you think, I think you used the word lazy, but I think personally, I have considered that hallucinogenics, if you're really seeking, to develop your spirituality or your intuition or, how to use frequency and entrainment for your benefit, I almost feel like the psychedelics are like cheating a little bit.
And that's what I mean by lazy.
Yeah.
The cultures that tend to not use them, I'm going to say have a more of a store,
Maybe it's a
like,
balance issue.
Austeria.
yeah, but there's the ritual experience. There's the dancing around the fire and that doing that whole thing. But for the people that are going to have that are part of the ceremony, because a lot of times these ceremonies were part of a like if a boys are getting circumcised, so there's a whole thing going on, or there's a marriage or whatever, but there would be a whole thing of fasting, abstaining from
Yeah.
sex, and so eating certain foods or not eating certain foods. And so there was this whole thing around it, that prepared the person to go into that experience. And that's the lazy part to me, is that we're not really willing to necessarily do that in order to have the end results.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
So
only thing I
then,
might say about that was that I heard somebody locally who speaks in a lot of Indian culture referred to mushrooms and things like that. She called them plant teachers. That they were there, that the universe has put them there to help us learn, to help jumpstart learning. Just another opinion that I had heard.
Well, and there are people that will today go down and consume ayahuasca because there are stories of where information will come through, and so there is the opportunity of interacting with the gods, but then there is also the opportunity of going inside and getting guidance to what you need for you. And that would be one of the reasons why some of these rituals would occur, is that there's something going on. There is someone who's very sick and they need insight. They don't have any rain or whatever is going on. And so they would go, and I just say commune with gods, but they would go into these states to get information to bring back to share with the different people in the community.
Right. So any results that they receive, because it's induced by the substance, are not necessarily going to be reproducible, right? Because they haven't developed their practice or their ritual to get there. And what about, like, if you're opening yourself up, are you opening yourself up to, other energies that are out there that could give you bad information or attach to you? Or
Definitely. I mean, there are there are good spirits and there are bad spirits, and I think it depends on, and I think that's part of where the preparation comes from, and again, in these cultures, there's a lot more consciousness about what is potentially out there, and there are stories of, like people using this skill to harm other people, that they will contact dark entities to do bad things.
wow. So this is probably the answer to this is probably way longer than we have time for today. But so, what can we do? Can we develop our own energetic ceremony or ritual to do in the morning, so that if people go ahead and contact, the bully spirits out there, they're not going to really be able to get to us? Or
Okay.
is there some sort of a protective bubble we can be in? Or
Yeah.
That's a pretty long question.
I know. I'm sorry.
People ask me that when we're talking about the ghost thing.
Okay. All right.
Okay, because that's a whole concept unto itself.
Yes.
And to make it be a short answer is that, in order to not be affected by negative entities, so beings without bodies, the key is to be able to be in your center, and be with yourself. Because if you are energetically knocked out, if you are in a place where you're worrying, if you're in a place that you're in fear, or whatever the emotion is that you're carrying in that moment, that gives them the opportunity. It lets your barriers down and it gives them the opportunity to come and bother you. But when you are good and high and vibrating, your auric field is strong, then they got nothing.
I love it.
Yeah, same thing. If your vibration is high and good, then you're going to draw those kind of outside vibrations to you also. If you feel like you're just laying on the floor and just ready to die, well, then that's what you're going to draw to you again. So that's exactly right.
Well, there are some practitioners, and I won't name any names, although they, I think, had some very bad entity experiences, because they went from telling people to call in their angels to now they're a born again Christian and it's all demons.
Yeah.
But they would say, call in your angels. If you're having a bad day, call in your angels. And I would just sit there and it's like, don't do it. Don't do it. If I'm in a bad place, if you're in a bad place, if you, all of you are in a bad place, you don't want to just ask spirits to show up and give you and help you, because you don't know what you're calling in, So if I have bad energy, it might be a little bit better, but it might be Fred the janitor who shows up and not anybody good, or
not Metatron or whatever.
Well, but they might say they're Metatron or
Exactly.
Michael, or it might be Michael, the guy that works in the etheric subway, that shows up and it's like, hey, I'm Michael.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings up a really good question. That brings up a really good question about, at what point did the myths, we kind of like classed all those Greek and Roman myths, as delusional, as just, well, they were like immature, they just didn't know. And yet from what you're saying throughout your research, that these characters or cartoon characters of that era and superheroes were actually real entities, and that you may be calling upon, as you're saying, you're suggesting that, you may be calling upon these kinds of entities, and you're not really understanding what you're doing.
I mean, I think when we talk about the gods, there is still dispute as to whether they were physical in nature or if they were non-corporeal. If our genetics have been modified, then there would have to be some kind of a physicality to them in order for them to, as we find in several narratives, for the sons of God to interact with the daughter, lay with the daughters of men. You got to have a body. I don't think an incubus or a succubus is really going to create offspring. Might try, might be fun, but I don't think it's going to work.
It makes for good comic art, right?
That's right. But when we, I was going somewhere, but I totally lost my train of thought.
Well, you said succubus and incubus, and that completely threw everything off the tracks.
That was kind of like just a
You were talking about being non-corporeal.
Right.
But when we talk about I know where I was going to go. What bothers me the most is that at some point in time, the concept that in stories that came from antiquity are figments of our imagination, and personally, if I could find that person, I would maybe want to smack them, because they have taken everybody from that point forward and made them look at these stories as if they're fiction. My belief would be, or my assumption would be, that it had to do with the rise of Christianity and the European expansion, or Christianity in general, where, no other gods before me. And so they were just put somewhere, but what they're finding, there's one story that comes out of British Columbia, and then another researcher in Australia. They were looking at indigenous myths, and so they started to excavate and found out that the stories that they told in Australia, that they were over 10,000 years old. And at this one particular site in British Columbia, it was over 14,000 years old. But the story stayed with the culture and relatively intact. And so we sit there and say, well, these stories are made up. It's like, well, but how would they know this piece of information if, and then there are the people that go, oh, well, the telephone game, well, here's the original story, and over time it changed and you end up with some weird thing. And they do change, I will admit that part, but I think the base of the story, the nugget of the story, stays the same and stays with a group, and that's one of the big platforms that I work on, is that there is a cultural narrative, a group of myths that start with in the beginning and go to around the flood story, maybe a little after the flood, that there's a global consistency of storyline. And from kind of that perspective, I went into this book, because this is really the story of humanity, with the thought of, human to act human. So if we have a global narrative, we also, once you start looking, we have a cultural narrative. So for example, the concept of marriage, of two people marrying each other, is found in every culture on the planet. So if it's something that we made up, then you would expect that some places would have marriage as part of their traditions. You would find other places that didn't have marriage as part of their traditions, and that the traditions themselves that are associated with marriage would be different. But they're not. They're relatively all the same, which to me says that there is also a cultural narrative that makes humans be human and Klingons be Klingons and Romulans be Romulans.
You're talking about kind of also things like basic moral codes, like Hammurabi's code, the Ten Commandments, and some of these other codes that came down through.
But I mean, when you sit there and go with the Ten Commandments and the Code of Hammurabi, he was Sumerian. Yeah. Biblical, pretty close proximity. We had the exile. But regardless of the culture, the concept of murder is not acceptable. The concept of stealing, not acceptable. And so even in our moral base of what we see as being right and wrong is consistent culture to culture. It's not like when, the British went to, New Zealand for the first time that these people had some completely different culture and they're running around like they're just a bunch of Klingons and and we're humans and we're dealing with something completely different. The base of who they were was the same. Now the traditions, they might have been dancing around the fire, trying to call up the gods,
Right.
but they're the same. But even if you sit there and look at rituals that come from indigenous cultures, you even find that there's commonalities in that.
Interesting.
People's nature probably doesn't change much.
But I think that these traditions are learned.
Right.
That they're not something that we don't just decide, all right, I'm just going to be a little gross here. Sorry, guys. But I don't think men decide that they want to cut the tip off their penis just for fun.
Yeah. Right?
You know what I mean? It's like, it seems more like there was an outside influence suggesting and pushing that, and from Australian traditions, one of the things we find out that the earliest traditions that were put in place was the law of circumcision, the law of subincision, which I'm not even going to talk about,
Wow.
and the law of marriage. And so those were the three big rules that were put in place earliest, and so, in every culture, or they believe that every culture on the planet at some point in time circumcised.
Wow.
Again, why would you do that? And I'll even kind of, so we don't really have a date, but the earliest suggestive evidence of circumcision goes back about 26,000 years. So like, you guys are familiar with like the Venus figures, like the Venus of Willendorf, the Venus of, so back to that time period. And so one of the things they have found, and this is a little embarrassing, but I'm going to say it anyway, is a series of phallic batons. See, that sounds really nice, and today we might go to an adult bookstore to go pick one up. But yeah, phallic batons.
I just got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And pictures say 1,000 words. Anyway, but one of the things that they have found, or that you see with these batons, is that they're all circumcised.
Interesting.
And some of them actually have like carvings, and so it's suggested that they might have done like some scarification, or there might have been tattooing, or something else happening there. I'm just reporting. I was more about the circumcision part, but that's at least 26,000 years old.
Wow.
And if they were doing ritual art with that, or doing art, we won't conjecture about what they were doing with the batons, but anyway, we can only guess that the custom went back much further than that.
I guess I should probably continue a little bit with you here, because in the Sumerian Tablets coming out of Constantinople, Turkey, written originally in Greek and in cuneiform translated to Greek, I'm sorry, and they talk about circumcision, and they say it's because the gods knew that the people were unclean and they would not clean themselves. So they helped them to stay clean and healthy so they wouldn't get sick.
Again, it was the gods requiring it. I mean, you sit there and you look at these cultures and these stories, and it's, I hate to say it, but humanity, when you dig through this stuff, really seems like a pretty dumb lot. It doesn't ever say like we invented anything or we figured this out. It's the gods gave us everything. They taught us.
I think that god that came up with that one, I think it should be in stiff competition with the village idiot. Actually, it's just stupid.
Well, now you bring out this whole study of a guided race that we have been nudged along and prodded from time to time. Do you see the same kind of prodding happening now? That I don't, or is it more? It's more of a subtle thing, I guess now. But we don't have any like all of a sudden a big dawnings. Do we have anything like that you could point to in
So
recent
what
times?
we see is that there, or how it appears is that there isn't necessarily this ongoing nudging, like day to day, but they'll come in and do a download. And so you'll see a spike in technology. You'll
Yeah.
see big changes happening, either physiologically or culturally going on. And then there are long periods of not a whole lot going on. They spike and then it kind of plateaus, maybe goes down a little bit, and then another spike and goes down. And I think that's when the intervention is happening, is that they're not here all the time, but they're here periodically. There are some people that suggest that the UFOs that have crashed, like Roswell, and some of the other ones, they didn't actually crash, that they were deposited. And so instead of the gods coming and downloading to us because we are so advanced, that was how they passed on the download information. And so from those crashed ships, we have this whole electronic revolution and Velcro. Um, and it, and that all started after the 40s, when Roswell happened and when all these other ships supposedly went down. And so is there a parallel of us reverse engineering their technology and making us be more technological? I think so. We haven't had the ship land on the White House lawn. And I find it interesting, and this is just commentary, there are so many people that are posting videos of UFOs, because everybody has a smartphone now and everybody can record, and there's just so much stuff that's being put out there that I find it hard to believe that there isn't a consensus that there's something going on.
Oh, there is.
No doubt at all. We're not doubters at all here. We know something's going on. That's what we're after is the evidence and the truth. So.
Well, there's a lot more activity now, so we can see that there's something is escalating to a point where hopefully something very interesting will happen very soon.
But is it escalating, or are we just getting better at documenting it?
Good point.
Or does any of it have to do with indeed the raising of consciousness so that we can tune into that frequency more?
Yeah.
Am I asking the hard questions?
Well, there are some people that I feel like their consciousness is being raised, and then there are other people that I think are bringing it down.
Good point.
But I read this thing once, which totally made sense, is that, in order for you to understand what you don't want and what direction you want to go in, you have to see the diametrically opposed side so that you can separate.
Yeah.
And then there was also some commentary that said, like, as, ascension happens, or as we raise our consciousness, that group of the diametrically opposed people will actually go along with it because they were just carrying out their role of being the bad vibe mojo people. So I don't know. There's so much stuff we don't know, and when people put it out like this is happening, we're ascending, we're doing, I'm like, I would like to believe that, but again, it's still conjecture.
Yes. Like, how do we know? How do we know that's really happening? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to have physical evidence of anything, but then again, these racings or vibrations may not be physical, so it's pretty tough to get that evidence that we're looking for.
Well, we don't have the technology to measure it. It's only a little over 100 years ago that we were able to utilize x-rays. And so prior to that, or televisions or cell phones. I mean, think about the mind shift going from wired telephones to cordless
Right.
to cell phones. That you can be in your car driving and talking on the phone. I mean, that's a huge shift.
That is.
Mm-hmm.
That was all inside of about 10 years.
I think it was a little more.
10 to 15 years was the.
Well, I guess they
something
had
like
those
that, yeah.
big clunky.
Right.
Well, you had the
The
bad
box.
phones, then you had the little
The bad
Motorola's, and then
Yeah,
you had the
yeah,
smartphones.
yeah.
So yeah, and then I don't know how many people no longer have landlines. Landline is like
I do.
you still have. Okay.
So
Andy.
I would like to segue just a little bit about your medical intuition and what you do with that and how you help others with that. I'm so intrigued with this.
And so, I mean, primarily I have people that have some kind of health issue, health concern, that they need some insight and guidance. I have a large number of people that don't want to go to the doctor, or they go to the doctor, but they want verification, or the doctor just said, here, take this medication, and they don't want to do that. So they want some kind of alternative. So one thing that didn't come up in my bio is that I am a naturopathic physician, which is a
Yes.
doctor that works with herbs, supplements, and alternative approaches to wellness. And I have a PhD in natural health counseling. So I mean, there is background to support what I'm talking to people about. But then I also have a large number of clients that go to the doctor and they can't find anything, but they can't get out of bed. Or they'll go to the doctor, then they'll get referred, and they get a totally secondary diagnosis, like you have MS, no, you have lupus, no, you have Lyme's disease,
Right.
and they're like, I don't even know what's going on or what to do,
Right.
So people come with. I mean, I had a client today that was being attacked from from beings from not this dimension.
Okay.
And I was just like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. And actually, it was a great session because, I've never really, had to address multiple people I have in a different way. But no, it was a great session. So, I just don't never know what people are going to bring to the table, but I'll talk about pretty much anything.
So, Dr. Rita, that person had physical symptoms, and it was from being attacked from another dimension?
Well, I said attacked, and that was a misstatement on my part, that these beings were communicating with her from a different dimension, and
Okay.
she was experiencing physical symptoms.
Amazing.
And so, but the physical symptoms were a direct result of them communicating with her.
Wow.
It was really, every sentence I said to her was, okay, well, this is going to be really weird. Okay, this is going to be really weird. It was kind of outside my box.
Wow.
But
Well, for something like that, I have a quick question. Okay,
sure.
this is something that kind of puzzles me because in these areas where it's experiential, how do you discern? Is this a gift this has to be something you have to be able to do also, is to discern between what's delusional and what's really happening.
You mean in my mind or their mind?
Well, all of it. I mean, it's got to be. There's got to be borderline where there's got to be some. I guess you have your own guideposts to kind of show you along the way.
Right.
I would
Right.
think. Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing this a really long time. And so, like I joke around, I have the peanut gallery, which are some guides that are the biggest backseat psychic guide people, because I'll ask them a question, they say nothing. But if I'm talking and they'll be like, no, don't tell her that.
Wow.
So there are different things that happen in session, where I'll be talking and a word will come up, like olive leaf extract, and so if you're not familiar with olive leaf extract, and it's really not about that, but sometimes weird stuff comes into my head, that I've heard of, but I'm really not sure why I'm getting it in a relationship to this person. So I always sit there with my computer and it's like, oh, well, this is really good for dealing with blah, 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 which is exactly what we were just talking about.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like, and so I've gotten to where I used to filter a certain amount, like I'd get this weird stuff in my head and just really not mention it. But it's gotten to the point now where it's like, okay, like I had a client who called and she was having these symptoms. And what I kept feeling for her was that she had water on her brain,
Mm.
which I don't even know if you can have water on your
You
brain.
can, yeah.
Okay, but in that moment, I didn't know. But it
Right,
just felt liquidy in
right.
there, and the liquid was creating pressure, and that's where these symptoms were coming from. And she was like, nah, 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 my mom has the same thing. This can't be it. So we hang
Wow,
up, and I looked up water on the brain and found out it was a real thing.
yeah.
That the symptoms were like boom, 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 everything she was complaining about. And there was a genetic component, and so it was consistent that it could be passed down in family lines.
Wow.
Wow, wow. Well, I observed you in one of your videos doing energetic healing, and no, I love it. I love it. I'm a Reiki master, and I got that title right
Hmm.
to have a socially acceptable package for what I do.
Hmm.
So, and you were giving her a spinal adjustment. I love it. So, can you talk a little bit about how um, how disease shows up right on the energetic level, and we don't necessarily see it in the body, and the other way around, when disease has manifest in the physical, how working on the energetic body helps.
Hmm. So
Thank
I was just laughing because, and that video is on my webpage, either medicalintuitive.com or soulhealer.com, or medical intuitives, medical dash intuitives with an S.com. Um, when I'm doing energy work, I yawn a lot,
I
which
saw
is
that.
that there's energy moving through me, and that my client's energy is shifting, and so it is a little bit embarrassing, and that's why I was laughing because I yawned through the whole thing, and this was aired on TV, and it's like
Oh.
through the whole
Well,
So
good guitarists have
mainstream
a
people
guitar
might not
face.
get it. Yeah, mainstream people might not get it, but a lot of people who do energy work have symptoms, if you
thing,
will,
right?
right? Yeah.
And so my observation is that if someone is experiencing some kind of disease short of they've broken a bone, they have some kind of virus, which or back, infection, because
Yeah.
that typically comes from the outside, and we pick up the bug. So accident, infection, I throw neglect, which is you're not eating right, you
Mhm.
need to lose weight, which is kind of underscores things like uh, gallbladder disease, underscores high blood pressure, underscores diabetes, so there's stuff that we choose to not do that ends up manifesting in physical disease, but the bulk of the rest of it, there is an emotional or psychological element that is underlying the disease. And so when I work with my clients, there's addressing what's going on in the physical body, but in order for them to really heal, they need to address why they got sick in the first place.
Yes. Boy, that's tough. Right.
Yeah.
Well, not if you just are blunt like me and just
I
go,
know, and
blah blah blah.
I love your bluntness, and I imagine that when people come to you, they are prepared for that, to some degree.
Well, I'm not really sure about that part, but but
Oh.
but if it's going to be, I mean, there's straightforward, and then there's sometimes I even have to be blunt for my own level of like comfort of talking to people on the phone,
Wow.
and so then I just sit there and go, okay, so I'm going to say something really blunt,
Yeah.
kind of on the borderline of you might think it's hateful, but you know, and what I find is that if there's a message that I'm supposed to pass on, that spirit will cut me off,
Mhm.
and so they'll just keep replaying the same message, and I'll try to move on to something else because I don't want to say it,
Right.
and it's kind of like nothing. You
Mhm.
got nothing, you know. Where are we? I'll skip the story. Yeah.
Aw.
So, um, yeah, and so I like it.
That's amazing. It's
You know, and I feel like, you know, my clients get benefit and they get well and they have peace of mind and they get direction as to where they need to go next, you know, whether it's, you know, working with herbs and supplements, go to their chiropractor. I mean, I have sent, even though I don't like to, but I will if it's what's necessary. You know, I've sent people to their doctor. I had one client who came in and I didn't know what was going on. I mean, just what I was seeing didn't make any sense to me because it was like the energy in his body was like he was filled with water and his energy level was to here. And I could see it and I could communicate what I was seeing, but I didn't know what that meant. And so I was like, you know, I'm just feeling, and this was very strong, that you need to go to the doctor and get tested, you know. But he came to see me because he didn't want to go to the doctor. And his wife said, well, he has an appointment in like 3 months. And I looked her straight in the face and I'm like, he doesn't have 3 months.
Wow.
And so they ended up going to the emergency room like the next week and he had ALS.
Wow.
And so that's what that was,
Yes.
was the manifestation of that disease in his body.
Wow.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Since you have this metaphysical and medical connection, what do you think about people that are saying that there's a common term going around now? I hear this term, ascension symptoms. Do you think there's any merit to that, or have you heard some of this that's been discussed?
I mean, I've looked at that. I mean, I think, you know, we were talking about entrainment and group resonance, you know, and people on the planet resonate with each other. You know, when 9/11 happened, everybody was resonating at a very similar place. And so if there's a lot of trauma going on, if there's a lot of weirdness going on, it's kind of like you can ask everybody, it's like, yeah, you know, I haven't been sleeping real well. Or, you know, yeah, I don't really feel very grounded. And so, you know, that's how you can sit there. And actually, I was doing, and I quit doing a weekly, like planetary psychic reading, just really tapping into where the energy on the planet was. And, you know, and so are we ascending? I mean, that one's really hard for me to put my finger on, you know, because we just are always, you know, we're subject to what's going on, you know, and there's just so much energy and distortion just in the ethers, you know, and now they're bringing in 5G, you know, I mean, so we have, you know, cell phones and this and that and Bluetooth and television. And so there's all this stuff going on that is invisible. It's invisible to us. And so how much of that is having an impact and is that what's causing the symptoms? You know,
Excellent point.
Well, how would that
we don't really know.
how would that
Yes.
cause?
Wow.
Well, we know all that stuff does have an effect. We're not for sure exactly like the smart meters and so on. You know, that does have an effect, but does it have an effect that can get the similar symptoms, maybe, or equal to or lesser than the raising of the general vibration? If you look at the Schumann resonance, you can see that it hasn't been spiking very much for thousands of years. Well, you know, at least since Schumann, and then now it spikes to well over 100 when they're wobbling around 7.8 since we started measuring it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something happening in the resonance of the earth.
Right. But the question is it the earth or is it what we're doing on the planet that's making it shift? You know, we don't, you know, it's, again, we don't have the technology to be clear about it.
Exactly. We don't have the evidence for the answer to that.
You know, and no one's really doing measurements in Faraday cages to see what happens if you don't have all of this electronic noise around you all the time. I mean, we are in so much electronic noise, you know, and what impact that's having on us, we don't know. I mean, there are some researchers that suggest that the electronic noise is making it more challenging for us to be in alpha waves, you know, the 44.32 wave, you know, like the ohm wave, whatever that number is, you know, And so it puts us more into a mental place versus in a restful body place where healing, internal healing can happen.
We have one question, Doctor. Well, there's a couple, but the last one said, I read somewhere that recently said that humanity will be making a discovery of the location of the human soul. Anything you can speak to
I got
about that?
nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Oh,
either.
wait a minute. I already found it. It's in here.
Aw, yes, yes. Breaking news. Dr. Rita discovers location of the soul. Yay!
Surprise
Now
inside.
Well, there is something to this. When people say, I feel it in my heart, well, can the heart feel? Yes, it can, because science has found that there's an other brain in the heart. It has somewhere between 40 to 50,000 neurons in there. And this little brain in the heart, it can think, hold memory, and in fact, it is hardwired to the pituitary.
I was reading a little bit about that, but go ahead.
Yeah, and this means that when I say I feel it in my heart, I know it in my heart. How can you know if it's just a muscle? Yeah, you can, because there is a brain in there, and it does have intelligence.
And I'm going to go very esoteric on you here for a second. But in both chakra and Kabbalistic thought, which is the basis of Jewish mysticism, this is the way that I like to describe it, especially in the Kabbalistic perspective, everything joins together at the heart center, at the fourth chakra. And so this is how and where we should be navigating our world, and so when we sit there and look out and try to make decisions, the decision should be, well, how does this feel to me? And it sounds really big headed, but there are so many people that don't navigate from that place, and they are taken advantage of and used, or are doing things that are not for their best benefit. They're coming from this place as opposed to a heart place or a soul place. And all you have to do is look at any corporation, because they are totally coming from a this place and a this place versus from a heart place, which would say, well, what's the best thing for us? If I'm doing this thing for society, I'm making the next best widget that comes in lots of plastic packaging that will fill the landfills. They're not thinking that way. They're just thinking from this sense and a dollar and cents place versus what's going to be the best thing for humanity, for our next step forward.
It's transactional. It's not heart-based. What Aage was mentioning earlier about the heart having a brain, and this is also why when people get really emotionally damaged in their heart broken, that actually can affect your overall physiological health too, as well. That emotional breaking that you go through can literally affect your physiology.
In Chinese medicine, and they have the meridians, and there are meridians that attach to just about every organ or organ group, except for the heart. There are two. And so there's the pericardium meridian, and the pericardium is the sac that sits around the heart, and it's kind of like a shock absorber that the heart sits in. And then there's the heart and the heart meridian. And I've done a lot of work with clients addressing meridian and meridian health and doing meridian clearing, so not acupuncture, but doing energy work on the meridians, which is actually really interesting and very effective. And what I have found is that, there's a bunch of stuff that's thrown at us in life, and is just, we have to deal with. And I'm going to say heartbreak.
Yes.
But what I find is that their pericardium might look like people were throwing eggs at it. I mean, it is just covered with stuff. And so that heart energy has a hard time coming out and interacting.
Wow. This is something you see spiritually in your mind or in your mind's eye? Okay, so this isn't something you're actually getting x-rays of. This is something you're intuitively seeing.
Yeah. versus the number of people who actually have had their heart broken, like from an energetic meridian, what you're talking about, that physiological place. Because when the heart is broken, it's a very challenging to repair. The other stuff is much easier to clear because it's on the stack that's protecting the heart. But if it actually gets through and damages the heart, energetically speaking, much harder to do, but much harder to resolve emotionally, on emotional levels and, obviously other levels as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we have this other concept that some people get heart transplants and they end up with the traits of a person that owned the heart before. You could have a lady that's been never drunk, had alcohol in her life, and she get the heart from a lush. She's gonna start drinking beer, and goofy stuff like this happens.
Mm-hmm. But
So
if
even
they were really good at balancing my checkbook.
yeah. But the traits follow the actual, for a short period of time, dead heart because of the memory in the cells and that little heart in the brain in the.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I know there have only been 2 times in my nursing career where I saw a doctor, only 2, write the diagnosis of heartbreak.
Wow.
And I love both those doctors. I never even saw them. I only saw the notes, but because they were so aware of that, and dare to step out in the medical community to call it heartbreak, was just amazing, amazing. But where is the meridian for the heart that you were mentioning?
All right, I have to really think.
Okay,
When I'm
sorry.
working with clients, I have my little cheat sheets.
Of course, of course, of course. Well, I wanna book a session with you, Dr. Rita. This is
Okay.
so interesting, and I'm so grateful. And if you could, from all of your experience and what you do on all levels, if you could give people words of wisdom or a tip for health or energetic health, is there anything that stands out to you right now?
I think, what it really comes down to is listen to yourself, honor yourself, and follow your own guidance.
Beautiful.
And just commentary to you and for everyone listening, if you are interested in scheduling an appointment, the easiest way of getting a hold of me is to go to either soulhealer.com or medical-intuitives with an S on the end.com, which is more the health and healing website versus the kind of hodgepodge of all kinds of stuff, but includes health and healing. But on either of those pages, use the contact form and send me an email. I'm very responsive to email, phone calls. They roll the voicemail a lot.
Yes.
So,
okay. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Any last questions for Dr. Rita for this?
Yeah, and also, where can we find your books?
So obviously all of my books are available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. I would prefer if you went to soulhealer.com, so not the medical one, but soulhealer.com. All of my books are available, as well as some videos that I've produced, feature-length videos, as well as video shorts are all on that website. And any books that you buy from me come autographed for free.
Yay.
And that's priceless.
It is. It's your energetic signature too, right?
That's right.
I love it. Dr. Rita, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you.
This has been great. I know that we could probably go on for another couple of hours. There's even more. Every time a lot of this subject is could daisy chain in just a bunch of other directions. So we're definitely going to have you back again. This has been great. So.
Yes.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was
You
fun.
guys are awesome.
Yeah, we had a few people. Just a quick shout out to the folks in the chat room. Thank you all for coming by. And maybe I didn't see any real questions. There was a couple of questions I couldn't quite understand. I think we kind of answered it in the discussion. And of the books that you have available, the Stepping Out of Eden is your latest?
Correct. Stepping Out of Eden is the latest, but I will make the commentary. So, E.T. Chronicles, or Man-Made, the Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, same book. The Man-Made book has a cooler cover, but it has like grammatical errors. But they come free.
Well,
But it has
kudos
a
to you
cooler
for
cover, and it looks nicer with the Stepping Out of Eden cover. Just
kudos to you for getting this many books done. I went through one, and it was not. It was what do you call it? It was just science fiction. This is real research that you've done. So I would encourage anybody and everybody, if they can, get out to your site, check out your work, schedule an appointment. There's just an amazing wealth of information here. So definitely want to encourage people to do that. Aage, do you have anything?
Yeah. Oh, yes. My favorite question. If you could speak to the whole world right now, what would you tell them?
say that again.
If you could speak to the whole world right now, what would you tell them?
Love yourself.
Mm,
Love yourself.
beautiful.
Wonderful.
I don't even want to dilute that. Let's end on that beautiful note. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, all right. Well, until we meet again, this has been a fantastic interview with Dr. Rita Louise. And until we meet again, thank you all for coming out to listen. And there's more information on her website, more information about who we are on our website. And thank you for listening. So we'll see you all next time.